We set off about 11:30 p.m. On the 3rd and drove for about 6 or 7 hours with stops down to Penzance. I parked up about 2 miles away from the harbour because the parking prices were a bit more reasonable. And I dropped Angela off with the baggage, and I parked the car and walked just over 2 miles to the harbour. And these are some of the shots of St Michael's Mount on the way to the harbour. This is me reaching the harbour. The crossing takes between, say, 2 hours 40 and 3 hours depending on the weather and so on, and the crossing was pretty good. It reminded me a bit like being on a carousel, you know, the horses where you go up and down. It was rhythmic but up and down. It's a good trip. We sat outside for the journey across to the Scillies to St Mary's towards the rear, and we noticed a whole bunch of us on the boat noticed a pod of dolphins following behind just off to the left hand side as you're looking at the screen now of the wake. Every now and again you'd see them pop up, and yeah, it was nice to see. Bye ferry, we'll see you in a week. And the Firethorn of Bryher was if you like, the boat taxi across to the Isle of Bryher. That was the weather really opened up and started to become really bright, and it allowed us to have a first chance to see just how beautiful the waters around the islands could be when the weather was good. Angela's a good friend whom I met just over 30 years ago at my first full-time job after leaving college, and it was her first full-time job as well after leaving school. And before we set off on this trip, she did warn me that she was terrified of boats, so this was a big challenge for her. There's a lot of boat sailing, not just from the mainland across the Atlantic Ocean to the Scillies, which is nearly 30 miles away, but also travelling between the islands. She did really well, she was really brave, and I think she felt a real sense of accomplishment and pride, and so she should. soon we land at the Church Quay, which is one of the two places you can catch and get off the boats depending on the tide. And we see our first beach. How spectacular is that? And then we pitch our tents overlooking Hangman's Island, complete with noose, and just slightly to the left is Cromwell Castle. That was our view from our tents over the Sound to the Isle of Tresco. Stunning. Follow the tractor trail and you end up at a cafe and the island's general store. And this, for those of you that are old enough to remember, Fraggle Rock. The sparrows on Briar had become very tame and friendly and would flock to you in smaller or even mid-sized groups for any tidbits they could scrounge from you. They were fun, they were nice, so we fed them.
Get it. This is too quick.
Straight out your fingers. You can tell by the way it moved up here how confident it was that it's used to doing this. That is seriously thinking about flying over. Oh, trying to hide it from this one. One might come to you now. Just lift it, let's see it. There you go. A number of people told us that we were unlucky. We'd had poor weather for September, the worst they'd seen in, I don't know, 15 years, some of them were saying. It was very windy for most of the week, and we had rain most evenings. But during the day, through till about mid-afternoon, it was generally sunny and very pleasant, and the wind didn't matter too much because it kept you cool whilst you were going on quite long walks. So we consider ourselves very fortunate. As you can see from some of these pictures of the sea putting on a bit of a show, it was pretty windy, and where we were camped meant we were very exposed. We weren't sheltered in any way, so it was pretty noisy with the wind blasting over the tents, shaking and rattling them around. And it did get, I mean, you'll see in some of the photos later on that the sea state got even more aggressive than what you're seeing now. It was beautiful to see though. shot there is called Sue, and she was on the Briar campsite with us and was bored and really wanted to go for a wander around Briar, so Angela and I escorted around. I'm king of the world! Lol. Briar is the most rocky of the islands, so as you're walking round, and I think I went round it about 3 times, you can have a little sort of scramble around in some places, whereas on some of the other islands it's very much just walking, all beautiful, but Briar just offered a little bit more bouldery type stuff for you to mess about with on your way around. Tresco was a lovely island. We started off by turning left after we got off the harbour, heading towards Cromwell's castle that we kept seeing along with Hangman's Island, and had a mooch around that, and then a bit of a steep climb up to King Charles' castle. Up we go. Such a diva. Duck, duck. Oh, hot guns. Imagine that's where the naughty boys and girls go. Defensive holes. Stalagmites. Or stalactites, whichever one it is. Many times as I was exploring these islands, I felt myself wondering what it would be like to be an invisible time traveller and being able to witness the events of life on these islands 200, 300, 400 years ago. Let's go a little further. Being there just made you feel that way, that you wanted to hark back to those times and witness some of it. I know it really tightens up. And here we are, having made our way up the hill from Cromwell Castle to King Charles Castle. Doesn't look very castle-y, and it's very much in ruin, but it's still nice to see before we then hooked left and started making our way anti-clockwise around Tresco's sort of coastal path. and today is the day we make it to St Martin's. I finally get a good swim there, but as usual, my beautiful children are never far from my thoughts. Here we are in St Martin's, just having a walk around at the moment. It's been beautiful, nice and quiet, very pretty. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, fabulous. As always, thinking about you, Jack, Honey May, wondering to myself whether I would love to bring you here, but wondering whether this type of holiday would make you happy or not. Because it is very much an outdoor holiday, so I'm not sure whether that would be enough for you, but I do wonder. I would love to experience this with you. I love you both very much, and I hope you're really happy. What is it again, Ange? As we made our way around St Martin's, we found it was quieter than we first expected it would be, and we came across a lovely campsite on there as well, so that would be one to consider, a contender for next time I'm down the Scillies. And we found there was a high town, a middle town, a church town, and these are all relevant to where they are. It's all very descriptive. Church town because of the church, and so on. That was what I affectionately called God Crayon, because it looked like God had got a crayon and smacked it into the ground. Yeah, it was a beautiful place. At this point, I'd decided I'd waited long enough for a swim, and decided, to hell with it, windy or not, I'm going in. And oh boy, it was fantastic. a few random pictures of the time I spent bouncing around the sillies, and I will jump back on once the images change to somewhere new. this lovely night shot. Woke up and it was the low tide. There are 2 times in a year where the tide's exceptionally low and gives you the opportunity to not have to need a boat to travel from Briar to Tresco. You can actually walk across the Sound. I think the highest it got up to for me was about just just under my waist, or just up to my waist, just around about there. I didn't follow everyone else. I waded right into the middle and then walked along the Sound. Everyone else got their feet wet. I got a lot more wet, but it enabled me to see a lot of nice things. Get ready for the sad faces. This is because we are on the boat to St Mary's, which is our final day. We travel over there in the morning, spend some time there through the early afternoon before we get on the Salonian 3 back to Penzance. It seemed strangely appropriate that we would be touring the fortifications of St Mary's, given the news we had that morning that Her Majesty the Queen had passed away. As we went round, we saw all the flags set at half-mast. but being on the Scillies meant we were strangely isolated and not swamped with the constant news and details and minutiae of what was happening. That would come once we returned home.